You don't need to worry about me seeking revenge on Diddy. That's not what this is about. What I've done is far more deliberate and far more permanent. I made 3 moves, carefully planned and executed, to ensure that he will never be able to come after me, my family, or anyone else ever again. First, I personally reached out to the legal teams representing the victims. The real reason he isn't walking free isn't public speculation, it's the cases that were buried quietly for years behind the scenes. I helped provide legal funding for 7 victims whose stories had been solid, consistent, and ignored for a long time. Then I brought in some of the strongest criminal attorneys in the country, people who don't blink when power pushes back. Those cases didn't disappear this time, they stacked. Second, I moved in silence on the business side. Every potential post-release deal he had lined up, I bought it up, blocked it, or dismantled it. That wasn't spontaneous. I planned this 2 years in advance. By the time he was sentenced and still clinging to hope of a comeback, every partner had already cut ties. There was nothing left waiting for him on the outside. Third, and this is the part people don't understand, I don't just have evidence, I have backups, layers of them. What I uncovered wasn't a single scandal, it was an entire minefield buried for over 20 years. I dug into 3 decades of secrets supported by first-hand testimony from victims. We interviewed more than a dozen people he manipulated, threatened, or violated. You think that's harsh? No, what's harsh is destroying people's lives for decades. I'm just making sure he spends a few more years in prison for it. I'm not afraid of his people, I'm not afraid of his threats. I know he's still sitting in there fantasizing about a comeback, imagining the world forgot. But the truth is simple, he's never coming back. I feel funny, is this real life? Yes, Justin, this is real life. I feel crazy, like the world is spinning. Don't touch your stitches, Justin Bieber, don't touch your stitches. What's happening? No, Bieber, stop. You have 4 eyes. I have 2 fingers, now 3. Is this going to last forever? Justin, stop it. For years, moments like these were treated as jokes. Awkward clips were laughed off. Uncomfortable footage became memes. Serious questions were brushed aside as entertainment. But now, with 50 Cent's documentary reopening the record, every detail is being re-examined. Every ignored whisper is resurfacing. At the center of it all stands Diddy, a powerful figure who shaped careers, and Justin Bieber, a young star pulled into that world before he was ready. This isn't about viral clips or online gossip. It's about influence, silence, and how the truth stays buried when too many people benefit from looking away. Justin Bieber's rise was sold as a modern fairy tale. But behind the spotlight was a far more troubling reality, a child navigating adult power structures with little real protection. Old interviews and footage show him placed in environments where access and influence mattered more than boundaries. These moments circulated publicly and were dismissed as harmless celebrity culture instead of being questioned as dangerous exposure. This isn't about one incident, it's about normalization, an industry trained to look away. An industry where youth is traded for opportunity, leaving one unavoidable question: who is responsible for the price that gets paid? Usher himself once admitted, "I saw things I shouldn't have seen at that age." Think about that, that tells you everything. He was around situations he should never have been exposed to at Diddy's parties. And if he saw things he shouldn't have, then what does that say about everyone else who saw the same things and stayed quiet? That silence isn't accidental, it's cultural, no snitching. What made it worse was watching Usher later praise the same man who groomed him, giving him a pass in public interviews. People who were around during that time know there was an incident, one that sent Usher to the hospital. Let him tell that story himself. But the question remains, how do you publicly praise someone who put you in that position? For years, 50 Cent stayed outside Diddy's inner circle, aware of what was happening but unwilling to be part of it. His warnings were dismissed as rivalry, as trolling. Now, as legal pressure mounts and public perception shifts, those words are being reevaluated, not because they prove everything, but because they show how long warnings can exist before anyone is willing to listen. Justin Bieber even told his own story through music. Lonely. Everyone heard the song, few listened. He spoke about being taken advantage of at a young age. The problem with being a victim of someone that powerful is the leverage they hold: videos, recordings, embarrassing or incriminating moments created under pressure or influence. Diddy's power extended beyond music. He controlled access, who got in the room, who advanced, and who disappeared. Justin's closeness to that world wasn't unique. It reflected a system where opportunity flows through gatekeepers instead of accountability. When leaked footage later surfaced of Justin partying with Diddy, people laughed again. But look closer, he was okay. His eyes, his movements, none of it looked normal. The deeper issue isn't speculation about what happened behind closed doors. It's why accountability collapsed in a system where success depends on proximity to power. When progress requires access, boundaries blur, caution becomes weakness, self-protection becomes a threat, and the real question becomes, who is truly free to say no? Long before Justin, Usher walked the same path. He admitted that environment exposed him to adult pressures far too early. that history matters not as speculation but as precedent. When the same patterns repeat across generations, coincidence disappears. What remains is a structural failure. So when the next young star was placed in the same position, the unanswered question lingered: why was nothing changed? Think about it, Usher had already been hospitalized from his own experience. And still, Justin was taken there after guardianship was transferred, after management resistance was overridden, after boundaries were removed for just 48 hours. Those weren't accidents, they were decisions. This story isn't about gossip, it's about power, silence, and responsibility. It's about how systems protect themselves and how often the cost is paid by the young, the vulnerable, and the replaceable. And the most unsettling question remains: how many warning signs were ignored, not because they weren't clear, but because listening would have required action? Someone once pointed out something that, in hindsight, is deeply unsettling. The way Diddy seemed to fixate on Justin Bieber, the intensity, the access, the closeness, didn't look like mentorship. To many, it looked predatory. That perception alone should have set off alarms. According to the narrative that followed, Usher stepped in. He allegedly recognized what was happening, intervened, took over management, and even gained custody, promising to protect Bieber and look after him. But then came the next question, the one that lingers uncomfortably in the air. After stepping in, why was Justin still sent into environments that would later be described as dangerous? So the question has to be asked plainly: does that sound like the behavior of a good guy? Because it doesn't. It's horrible, truly horrible. And now that more details about Diddy's behavior have surfaced, the question grows sharper. What kind of person takes another young boy, another gifted, talented child, and places him directly in harm's way, as if substituting someone else so the spotlight and scrutiny don't fall on them instead? As scrutiny around Diddy intensified, something familiar happened. Many of his former allies didn't rush to defend him, but they didn't speak out either. They disappeared into silence. Meanwhile, 50 Cent did the opposite. He spoke louder, more directly, exposing what many insiders already understand but rarely say out loud. There is an unspoken code in the industry. Speaking up costs relationships. Staying quiet protects them. Over time, loyalty and self-preservation blur together until they're nearly indistinguishable. This silence isn't always driven by fear, it's driven by calculation. It's an environment where honesty constantly competes with career survival. And when silence becomes the safest option, one unavoidable question remains: can real accountability ever exist in a system designed to suppress it? Then there are the moments that seem casual on the surface but feel disturbing once examined closely. Jokes made live on air, stories about childhood closeness, wrestling over cereal, laughing it off as harmless nostalgia until someone stops and says, "Wait, did you hear what he just said?" Live streaming, no filter, no second takes. And suddenly, what was meant to sound playful feels inappropriate, even revealing. People laugh it off, we were just having a good time. But discomfort lingers. Then comes the harsher accusation: Usher as a procurer. And if Usher knew what was going to happen to those young kids he brought into those spaces, those so-called camps or parties, can he really be called a good guy, especially knowing what he himself went through, especially knowing the risks? Howard Stern once asked a simple but telling question: would you send your kids to Puffy's camp? The answer came instantly: hell no. So it's not safe for your children, but somehow it was acceptable for everyone else. That contradiction says everything. Children end up harmed, stories dismissed, investigations shallow or non-existent, lives reduced to footnotes. Let's be honest, these are not good people. Stop pretending they are. And then there's a detail that refuses to go away. Justin Bieber publicly stated that Usher asked him to perform at the Super Bowl with him, and he turned it down. Think about that. Who turns down the Super Bowl? Justin Bieber has never publicly accused Diddy of criminal behavior. That matters. But what he has spoken about openly and repeatedly is anxiety, emotional exhaustion, instability, and deep psychological strain. He's described being pushed into extreme pressure at a very young age, surrounded by adults with competing interests, expected to manage global fame without protection, guidance, or emotional tools. That history doesn't give us simple answers, but it dismantles simplistic explanations. It reveals the real cost of growing up too fast in an industry where protection was never clearly the priority. Later, when Bieber spoke emotionally about Billie Eilish, it wasn't speculation, it was recognition. He was nearly in tears, saying he just wanted to protect her, to keep her safe. Why? Because he knows. He knows what happens behind the scenes, just like people knew what was happening with other young stars. The patterns repeat, different names, same outcomes. People call them monsters, not out of exaggeration but exhaustion. When someone later asked about Diddy, one response stood out. I grew up with his parents, I knew his parents. What's happening now was happening long before him. That statement reframes everything. It suggests a cycle, something inherited, normalized, passed down. Stories emerge about informants, criminal entanglements, whispered rumors in Harlem about family history, about identity itself. Nothing clean, nothing simple, everything tangled. Diddy's story is convoluted by design, and nobody wants to talk about who he was before he became Puffy. That part of the story remains buried. But maybe that's exactly where the truth lives. When the narrative finally entered the federal courtroom, the tone shifted. Speculation gave way to documentation. Evidence replaced rumor. Charges, rulings, procedures, all precise, all limited. Courts judge individual actions, not entire cultures. And that limitation leaves the deeper issue untouched. Because what's legal isn't always what's right. And closure on paper doesn't erase systemic damage. So when a case ends, the real question isn't whether justice was served, it's whether accountability even begins there. Looking at power in the industry, there are very few figures bigger than Diddy. A handful of A-listers, a small circle, and circles protect themselves, always have. Rumors of tapes, multiple tapes, other people, other incidents. Nobody wants to see them, but everyone wants to know if they're real. Because if even a fraction of it involves minors, celebrity or not, the fallout would be seismic. And that brings us to the uncomfortable truth tying all of this together. The intersection of 50 Cent, Diddy, and Justin Bieber isn't about gossip. It's about a system. A celebrity-driven machine where power rises, vulnerability disappears, and accountability comes last, if it comes at all. Youth is marketed as authenticity. Access is rebranded as mentorship. Silence is rewarded as professionalism. When the same conditions produce the same damage again and again, the question can no longer be ignored. At what point does the system stop being background noise and start being the real issue?